Huh? Wake up. I thought you said we were talking about Sonora today. Oh, not Sonora. Sonora. That new game from Pandasaurus Games? That makes a lot more sense. Well, anyways, if you want to know more about Sonora, a game that you should definitely not sleep on, I cracked myself up. Then might I suggest? Hi, I'm Alex and welcome to Might I Suggest a Game, a channel devoted to helping you find your perfect board game. Today, I'll be giving my in-depth tasting notes on the new game Sonora from Pandasaurus Games. But before we start, if you're new here, why not take a second to click subscribe and that little bell button so you can get notified when I post new content. I know I'm a little biased, but I'm really proud of the content I've made on this channel so far, and I'm always open for suggestions. So if you have any new ideas for videos I can do, drop them down below in the comments. And if you're not convinced yet, why not check out some of the other videos on my channel so you can get a good sense of what I'm all about. Anyways, let's get back to the game. Sonora is a flick and write game. Yeah, you heard me right. Not a flip and write game, a flick and write game for 1 to 4 players that plays in about 30 to 45 minutes. It's a really interesting mashup of a dexterity game and a classic roll and write pen and paper style game, and it really took me off guard the first time I played it. One of my favorite things about playing new games is discovering something unique that I've never tried before. Sonora definitely falls into this category, and I can't wait to tell you more about it. So let's get into it. Will Sonora be the perfect game for you? Let's find out, shall we? The first thing you'll notice about Sonora is its amazing box art. The striking desert sunset colors on the cover really stood out to me and got me to take it off the shelf in the first place. When you open the box and get into the components, the style of the cover art really carries over into the actual game. The colors on the inside, though, are not quite as bold as they are on the outside cover, but it's probably a good thing because you might go blind if you kept staring at those neon colors all the time. The game itself has very few components and is really simple to set up. So let's jump into a quick gameplay overview. Sonora is played over 2 phases, the flicking phase and the writing phase. At the beginning of the game, players will collect their 5 different numbered discs, as well as a pen and a dry erase score sheet. Once you determine the first player, you'll rotate the board so the Cliff Dweller ruins are in front of them, and then you can start. In the flicking phase, players will take turns flicking 2 of their discs in a row, and landing them on one of the 4 quadrants on the board, which have different scoring conditions, which I'll explain later. There are also spaces on the board that will give you bonuses and a recessed area in the middle. If you land in the little zone in the middle, that disc now counts as a wild in the writing phase. If you accidentally flick it somewhere that you didn't want to flick it, you can use a reflick bonus to immediately try again. But be careful, you only start with 1 of these, so you'll need to acquire more if you want to take a few second chances. Once all players have gone around and flicked 2 discs, 2 discs, and 1 disc, players can now use the swap bonus if they want. This allows you to swap 2 of your discs on the board for each other, which can help you get better bonuses. Once again, you only start with 1 of these, so you'll need to acquire more if you want to keep switching your discs. Once all the swaps are done, you can now enter the writing phase. In the writing phase, you'll be translating the discs that landed on each quadrant on the board into various points that'll go on your score sheet. The score sheet is divided into 4 quadrants, which correspond to the quadrants on the flicking board and are also represented by 4 different animals. The 4 areas are as follows: the Cliff Dweller ruins, represented by the lizard; the creek bed, represented by the owl; the canyon, represented by the fox; and the mud cracks, represented by the rabbit. When you start the writing phase, all players have to score the Cliff Dweller ruins first, so let's start with that one. In the ruins quadrant, the total value of all the discs that you landed on the ruins or the ruins bonus in the flicking phase now equals the amount of hexes that you can cross off in this zone. Each zone has an extra bonus if you manage to be the first one to complete that zone, which is why this zone has to be filled out in turn order. If a player completes an entire zone, they'll take the top number and any bonus related to that. If the next player also completes that same area, they'll still get points, just not as many as the first player. Once you go around the table and score the ruin zone, all the other quadrants can be scored simultaneously. But let's go through them one by one. The creek bed zone has these winding paths with different values and bonuses on them. When you have a disc in the creek bed zone, you'll have to take the full value of that disc and move that many spaces down the path in a straight line. You'll cross off each space that you move and circle the final space that you end up on. This now counts as either points for this zone or a bonus that you can acquire immediately. Now be careful, you'll have to use the full value of each disc that lands on this area, so make sure you flick strategically. The bonuses get better the further along you get down the path, so it leads to some really interesting decisions later on in the game. The third quadrant is the canyon. In the canyon, you'll be placing different Tetris-style pieces on your grid based on the numbers of the discs that you flicked onto this quadrant on this round. Each of these shapes has to be adjacent to one of the shapes that you've already placed, which makes it an interesting spatial puzzle that feels different from any of the other quadrants. Your goal when you place shapes in the canyon is to cover up the bonuses and different cacti. The bonuses will obviously help you in different quadrants, but the more cacti you cover up, the more points you'll get for this canyon. You could try to spread the wealth and get a few of each cactus, or you can go all in on one cactus type and really max out the score. The last quadrant is the mud cracks. When you flick the discs onto the mud crack zone, you'll add up the numbers of all your discs and then use that as the sum total to fill out spaces on the mud crack zone in your score sheet. The mud crack zone is a series of connected nodes, which you'll fill out to create these fenced in areas. You'll get points at the end of the game based on what types of areas you fenced in. If you end up having extra points to spend in the mud cracks, instead of filling out a node, you can fill out one of the bonus boxes at the bottom for 1 point each. Once the whole stack is filled up, you'll get that bonus and you can use it immediately. As you go out from the center of the network, the flora that you can fence in are worth more, so try working your way all the way to the outside of the network. Once everyone has filled out spaces on their score sheet based on all the discs that they flicked that round, then you'll collect your discs off the board, rotate it 90 degrees, and start a new round. The game can be played over 5, 6, or 7 rounds depending on how long you want it to go. At the end of the game, you'll count up the scores from all 4 different quadrants, and whoever has the most points wins. Now let's get into my final thoughts. Sonora is a mashup of 2 awesome mechanics that I didn't know I needed until I played it. It has the skill and the chaos of other flicking games like Ice Cool, where you think you're going to be really good until you're not. Plus it has the strategy and decision making of any good roll and write. Trying to balance all the different scoring conditions really reminded me of That's So Clever, which is one of my favorite roll and writes. I love that in theory, if you're good enough at flicking, you can kind of supersede luck and land on all the bonuses you want to. But at the same time, you can't control the loose cannons that you're playing against, who will inevitably knock you off all the spots you want to be on. In Sonora, your strategy has to shift at any given moment, and it's your ability to pivot which will win you the game. Also, the more you get into it, you realize there's more strategy surrounding which disc to flick and when. Plus, there's a lot of bonuses lying around on the board and on your score sheet to help you hit those awesome combos. It's all very digestible and fairly easy to teach, so it's easy to get started right out of the box. It's definitely a game that you learn as you play, so I encourage you to just get started. Now, there are a few other things that I should mention. If you suffer from analysis paralysis, this might not be the game for you. Because the strategy moves so quickly and there's a bunch of scoring conditions that you have to keep track of, if you take a long time in making your decisions, it might make the game excruciatingly slow for the other players. I'm definitely less strategic and more chaotic, so it wasn't an issue for me, but I thought I'd call it out. The other thing to note is that the rulebook that came in our version of the game didn't really explain the bonuses very well, but I checked out the updated rulebook online and it does a much better job at that. So if you have any questions, I encourage you to reference that. Overall, I'm so glad that I added Sonora to my collection, and I can't wait to introduce it to more of my friends and bring it to my next game night. So if you're looking for a dexterity game that has a little bit more strategy than your typical Jenga, or if you're looking for a roll and write that requires a little bit less luck than you'd get with a set of dice, then might I suggest Sonora. Thanks so much for sticking around for my in-depth tasting notes on Sonora. I hope you enjoyed them and I hope you get a chance to try this game out. If you have any more games that you want tasting notes on, or if you have any more suggestions on new videos that you think I should make, drop them below in the comments. Thanks so much for all your support so far. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe so I can keep growing this channel and keep helping you find your perfect board game. Once again, this has been a Might I Suggest a Game production, and I'm Alex, your board game sommelier, signing off.